presentation.
Well, hello. Welcome to Angular DC after a 2-year lull. I am Dohan. Hello. Brendan and Alex. DC after a 2-year lull. This is our first streaming event, and expect some chaos.
I think you should expect chaos by inviting me.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you for joining us, Gleb. So we have the first half hour of the show. I guess for us to just chit chat and catch up on things as people come online, and then we'll kick off with the talk at the top of the hour.
Super. I like your background. I hope it's virtual.
No.
Otherwise, you have to clean up a lot.
It's my private space that needs no cleaning.
I like the Lego town.
Yeah, it's very relaxing. It's definitely got into it big time during the pandemic.
Does the Pac-Man work?
It does, yeah.
Excellent. Vintage.
Yeah, it's one of the arcade one-up machines. So having an actual vintage one would be pretty insane. All right. Well, I'm going to give the microphone to Brendan and Alex and Gleb for a little bit as I need to prep a couple of things as slides.
Sure. Yeah. So I guess we'll do a quick round of introductions before we get into the actual talk. My name's Brendan. I am a software engineer, primarily on the front end here at ZoomInfo. I've been doing software development for about a decade now, and I've really taken up a passion for Angular. Alex?
I'm Alex Hoffman, also at ZoomInfo. The same exact thing that Brendan said, except 1 year more experience. So one year wiser and better looking is what I'd like to say.
So I do whatever he says. Yeah. Gleb, you want to give a quick intro?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Gleb Bahmutov. I'm from Boston area right now. And as you can tell, during pandemic, I hit the wall and I'm still here. But I was a huge fan of AngularJS, right? Back in version 1, that was my jam. Really liked the simplicity, relative simplicity of scopes and digest cycle. And you can tell a lot about me by my enthusiasm for that. Right. Um, right now, I'm mostly working with front-end testing. And so today, I will kind of talk about testing, but I will talk about playing a game using a test runner. So I think it's a lot of fun.
Awesome.
I mean, it's Wordle, right? That is literally the only thing everyone has picked up during the pandemic. It's
Exactly.
everyone's been playing Wordle, and now everything's getting back to normal, and we still need we're going to need something else to play Wordle for us because we can't just be playing it all the time. So
the worst thing, when it just appeared, you kind of see those things on Twitter, like those squares, and you're like, pathetic losers, right? Like, what are they doing? And then you're like, oh my god, your day starts like.
It's addicting. It's my wife and I now play Quirtle, which is
yes, I saw
4 Wordles at once. I like baseball, so they have Wardle, which is just a baseball version with baseball players. There's a million. It's really blown up.
Yeah, I'm embarrassing to admit it took me a long time to figure out what the Twitter squares were. Like I knew it was Wordle because it says Squirtle, but I couldn't figure out what the colors meant. It should not have taken me that long, but now you can't.
Not everyone can be a genius like Alex, right? Like,
yeah,
we need mere mortals.
So who's better at Wordle, you or Cypress?
you will see, right? You will see.
Yeah, I guess I don't want to steal your thunder there before the talk.
No, it's absolutely. But one thing I heard a discussion on a podcast once where they discussed Wordle, and they actually say the difference between Wordle and every other game is that it's time boxed, right? You only have one Wordle per day, right? You can easily spend 5 minutes and then you know that you're done, right? It's not addicting where like, okay, it fights for your time throughout the whole day, right? And you're like, oh, is there another update? Right? It's really nice, right? It's compartment of your life where you can just spend whatever time you want, and that's it. Like it's a good game.
Yeah, it's nice because sometimes I'll give it 1 or 2 tries in the morning. If it just doesn't go well, I'm like, all right, I'll put it down for a little bit today and come back to this in a few hours.
And I bet you do the other thing, right? Where if you're like 5 out of 6 guesses, you open like your laptop and you try there, right? And then you come back to your phone and you're like, okay, now I'll enter it. That's actually the best strategy, right? Just play on one device and it will tell you the right answer, and then just enter on your reload. Right?
Yeah, and then you can go as long as you want.
Yeah,
there were some tough ones this weekend. I feel like the words have been getting a little harder. They're stepping their game up.
Yep. Sometimes you're like, especially if it has like double letters, where you're like, I cannot believe I didn't even thought that like today was a double letter, and you're like, oh. I'll show a screenshot because it took me a while to get, even with a hint. Gentlemen, can I try sharing my screen just to make sure it works?
Yeah, go for
absolutely.
it. Yep, this is the time to do it.
Just don't show today's Wordle answer. Someone might get upset
Spoilers. Okay. Yeah. So
awesome.
This is working.
Great.
Perfect.
Cool. Yeah. So for anybody who's tuned in the past few minutes, we are just kind of letting people join in. Give it about 20 more minutes or so till we begin formal introductions, and then pass it over to Gleb. But for now, just kind of hanging out, letting people have some time to join the meetup in the live stream.
And I can just leave the slides on, right? You're controlling it. Right? I don't have to.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So Gleb, have you been completely remote for the past couple of years? Have you been back in the office at all?
I've been remote before that.
Okay.
The difference was I worked at Cypress.io for 4 years. And while I was remote, I would go to Atlanta and we would meet as a team and as a company, like every 4-6 months, right? Regularly. And the difference now is that I've never met, and I changed jobs last year, I never met my coworkers, right? you kind of work remotely, and we were supposed to have like all company in Las Vegas in the fall, and then Delta hit, so everything was canceled,
Mm-hmm.
and now you're like not sure. So it's a different kind of remote where it's hopeless remote kind of how I call it.
Mm-hmm.
How about
Yeah.
you?
So we've been primarily remote. As you can see, we're in the office today. We've every once in a while here at Zoom Info, we'll come into the office here in Maryland, just when people from out of town are in the area. When we have big meetings or anything, things like that. But for the most part, been remote, and I mean, I've enjoyed it. I feel like I can get a lot done. I can be more heads down and be more productive remote. But obviously, there's a balance. So
Yeah, I don't mind. I can work from home. I also have co-working space, right? I can work from there.
Mhm.
It's nice to change. The company went fully remote, so Mercari US decided, okay, we're not even gonna have an open office.
Yeah.
They have like a small office now in Palo Alto just for like visa purposes, because if you're a foreign employee, you have to have like a physical office. But the rest, we say that's it. Like official company policy is fully remote,
nice.
which is nice.
Seems like
That's
a lot
awesome.
of companies are going that way. That seems to be the trend.
Yeah, I mean the amount of just time saved on commute alone is just massive.
Mhm.
And of course, though, I mean I do look forward to some kind of a cadence of maybe once every other week at a minimum to get together for team planning
Yeah.
or something like that. So I think it's still valuable to get together, but yeah, I mean, as a consultant, we do a lot of work for the federal government, where they usually like to shove us into small rooms. So that's not going to happen anymore, and that's definitely a positive. But it's also, what do you all think about? I guess people who are just joining the workforce, right?
So
Stuff.
I've got lots of opinions on that because we're hiring some of those, and also my sister, who doesn't do development, but she just entered the workforce. I know that she's having a little bit of a tougher time because usually you join and you have a class. She's just out of college. You have a class of individuals, and you got to build those friendships. So I think just out of college, or when you're new to the workforce, regardless of, or new to a new type of job, having some of that initial connection, building friendships, as well as sometimes there's maybe a little bit of a timidness or about bothering someone when you have to message them as opposed to just having them on the shoulder on the desk next to you. So I personally, I like a lot of the remote stuff, especially the commute time saved, but I do think there is some value being in the office. And it's interesting to watch how companies try and learn and balance that as we kind of work our way through this.
I have to say, my sister-in-law had the same situation. So she finished college online, living with us, then found a job virtually, right? And now she moved to California, but it's all remote, even in California. She's been to the office once. Majority of time, it's just you work where you are.
Yeah, and I think one other side effect is so many employees have started to realize, like, hey, the world is we're just kind of in like a remote world now. So people have started to move away and out of the headquarters areas of where offices are. So it's just everyone kind of has that expectation that there's some sort of flexibility in remote work, which is it's amazing how quickly it's happened.
Yeah, it would be hard for like me to force anyone, right, to like get to a specific place in the city and be there physically, right? Like, I have two people, well, one is starting, and he'll be actually from Boston area, but maybe we'll meet with him, one day, but just like socially, not to work, right? Work is from home.
Yeah, this new wonderful world we live in.
It saves time, like Dogan, like you said, it saves time.
Yeah. I mean, it was especially lucky, I guess, for for us, because our daughter was just at that age where it's a very small amount of years where you get to watch them grow up and become their own person. So it's definitely great to be there with her. So
Yeah, I have to say, like during COVID, when we all were together, like my family, etc., like we actually like each other, so we enjoyed our COVID times together, right? But I can totally understand if your, housing situation is difficult, if your family situation is tough, right? Being together all the time is a different story. We did a lot of
Absolutely,
hiking
yeah.
though, right? Like, especially in 2019, we hiked every place around Boston, like what else to do?
Yeah, I'll say that was the one thing that was tough for us, was with my daughter, which now, like compared to 2 years ago, it's now more possible. But 2 years earlier, it was a lot more big, because also let's not forget the homeschooling stuff was happening too.
Yeah.
And that was extremely tough. That was
Yeah.
just absolutely tough, especially for like a first grader. So yeah.
Yeah, my son is now in fourth grade, but yeah, during fourth grade, I think he did, like the kids. I was honestly very impressed. The kids handled homeschool, right? Masking that then at school much better than adults, right? It's for adults who are like driving trucks around, screaming about restrictions. Kids don't do that.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm glad we're all able to do this meetup again. It's been a long time since we did a last Angular DC meetup. It was at least 2 years ago, and it was all in person. So I'm props to Han for restarting this whole thing, and props to you, Gleb, for reaching out to talk. Glad we're doing this.
That's the least I can do, right? I mean, what am I going to do? Like enjoy my, evening? No, I'm not going to do that.
I think you meant to say that there's nothing you'd rather be doing this evening, right?
I meant to say that, but somehow it like got lost in translation. It got garbled by StreamYard, and the truth came out.
Yeah. By the way, please in the chat, we are doing a giveaway tonight from wallaby.js.
Ooh,
It's
always
a
fun.
Quokka JS and Wallaby JS license to the winner. So I think I'll let Brendan and Alex explain how we're gonna pick the winner.
Yeah, so it looks like we might have had a technical difficulty, and we kind of might have had the giveaway dropped a little sooner. We'll see here. We have two questions. One of them we might have slipped up on here. So we're going to do this. We have two questions, and we'll do this at the end of Gleb's talk. We'll do a giveaway. We'll have two trivia questions, and the first person to answer with the correct answer in the chat for each of those questions, we'll get one of those. One each. We'll have a Wallaby and a Quokka question for each. So hold on to that until the end of Gleb's talk, and we will drop those questions in the chat.
Okay. Yep. My bad. I think I posted it.
Do we have different questions now? Or are we gonna?
Yeah, I think we need a new question now.
Okay.
Yeah. But props to those who answered in the chat. We have all correct answers, so you guys know your stuff. So well done. That was a warm-up question.
Oh, the dog agrees.
Yeah, my dog likes to bark whenever I'm on a call of any kind. He'll be quiet the whole day, and then the moment I get on a call, he'll start barking.
Well, it's too bad because your dog just got the right answer for the second question. So now we need two new questions.
I think the dog is disqualified, too close to the organizer. Right? I demand a recount.
So, what all are you looking forward to in Angular this this upcoming year. So I know I'm a Google developer expert for Angular, so I do get to be in the monthly chats, and I do receive NDA'd information. So
you can tell us what we should be looking forward to.
That's what I'm saying. I can't tell you what you can look forward to. You tell me what you want to look forward to.
I think you're allowed to say anything you want as long as you wink at the end and you add, "You didn't hear me from me," right? That's totally legal. Like, it's a disclaimer. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah, just say maybe they're releasing this, and you're off the go.
Well, Santosh in the chat is talking about standalone components, and I'll have to agree that that's the part of Angular that I'm looking forward to most. So you can deliver, I guess, code without the entire architecture of Angular. Because we're that vision of being able to just code up a web component, compile it out, and push it out hasn't really come to fruition, at least in terms of your React or your Angular frameworks, because you have to bundle the entire framework with your little tiny component. So there's tons of great work that's being done to make that possible.
So I'm curious how that would actually work. So would the component be built like within an Angular project or workspace, for example, and then exported kind of as its own component without the whole framework around it?
So it's an open. I guess the RFC for it is open or is going to be public soon. Okay. I did miss a couple of the last meetings, and I guess part of the idea is because with Angular you're dependent on the injections, the dependency injections, the modules, and all that stuff. How do you rejigger things, or what kind of new metadata perhaps you add to hint at the compiler that hey, this is just going to be a standalone component. And doing all this without necessarily introducing brand new concepts.
Nice.
So it's definitely a tough balancing act that the team has to deal with. So.
Awesome. Well, yeah. So I know Dohan and Gleb, both of you are both really into open source and blogging. I know you both have done a bunch of talks and blogs. Either one of you, I guess. How did you guys get into that in the first place? What was your motivation?
Dogan, you wanna start?
Sure. Yeah. I think I got started with basically. Man, like I've just had this issue, and I'm sure someone else is going to have this issue, but it doesn't fit the format of Stack Overflow. So, how else can I get this thought out there, right? And I think at the time also a coworker was like running this travel blog that she just created, and she was showing me that she was having 50,000 views a month and stuff like that. I'm like, that's cool. I should, give it a go and see what happens. So that was kind of my way into it. And then of course I ended up publishing a couple of books and all that stuff, which completely burnt me out to writing anything.
It's a happy story.
I'm done.
Dogan has spoken, right?
And now he's a co-host.
No more writing. Not even to save his life. Like we're like, can you sign the document? I'm not gonna sign anything. I started blogging because I was forgetting things, right? And I was like, okay, I know I've done it. It's so frustrating. Let me look up, and I would like probably write it in some kind of private company wiki. And after I moved like to the third company, I was like, there's no way I'm updating another company wiki how to do things. I'm like, it just doesn't build up, right? Your expertise is gone as soon as you leave a job. So at some point, I tried using like TiddlyWiki, like one of those private wikis, which you can just put anywhere. And at that point, I was like, why am I bothered? Like, why do I keep it private? Right? Just make it out public. Nobody's gonna steal it. Just document all your work so you can find it later. And that's what I've been doing for a while now. And it works because my coworkers complain that half of my communication with them is just sending them links to my blog posts. That's it. Link, here's a link, here's a link.
Science, great.
Yeah.
Love that. There you go. Yeah, when I started out as a junior developer, I would message Dohan with questions, and he would just send me with a "Let me Google that for you" link every time I asked, and I stopped asking Dohan questions after that. I learned my lesson, and now I know how to Google things.
And it's funny that I had an experience at near the very beginning of my career where one engineer just started going around and asking this question, and before you know it, there were 10 engineers huddled around the cubicle of this person, and I'm like, well, wait a second, did you Google this? And this was when Google was relatively new, but it had already become a verb, right? So, and then it's like I Googled it on the side, and it was like within the first 3 links or something, the answer. And I was kind of horrified that, we just wasted 30 minutes of like 10 engineers, combined, or not combined, so 10 times whatever 30 minutes is, 300 minutes of time was wasted on this thing that just could have been Googled. So that's why it kind of became my first go-to, which then became everyone's first go-to. But I mean, not that was just my personal journey into it.
Yeah, to this day, I'm fully convinced that there's no such thing as a good coder. It's only a good Googler, and that's what it boils down to.
Oh, gentlemen, no, Googling is so last century. What you have to do now, what I'm doing, you have to write your own scraper, so you scrape your own blog. Right? Like I have, I'm scraping my blog posts, my video descriptions, my slide decks into like separate Algolia apps, so that I can have my own like Cypress tips/search where I can find anything I've done, right? Or almost anything. Like that's a lot more productive than just like trying to Google. You have to like really target it.
Nice, very nice. All right, we're getting to the top of the hour here, so I'm going to put this presentation up on the screen. There you go. All right. So yeah, everybody, welcome to a joint Angular DC and Tech Talk DC event after a 2-year hiatus. So we are restarting this as an online event, and I know there's an appetite for in-person events as well. So I think that's something we're gonna look forward to doing with Tech Talk DC, probably perhaps quarterly events that are in person. So I know that it's important for people to get together face to face and kind of exchange ideas, but also for technical talks or such as this with Gleb. This greatly widens our pool of amazing speakers that we can host, and it's also far more flexible to host people. So anyhow, everything is an experiment. So this is part of that experiment. And we're leveraging this StreamYard software, which allows us to multicast into multiple streaming things. So we'll experiment with. We're now doing it with YouTube, and we might include maybe Twitch or other venues. So we'll see how it goes. Definitely, please leave your feedback on the chat. I would love to hear it. So this is a reminder. We have a pretty strong code of conduct in our communities. In person, this is always was always important, and it continues to be important in the virtual world as well. So I'll post a link to that in the chat. So please, the overall sentiment being, just be kind to one another. We're all human beings. So let's keep it at that. And we do have also an anonymous incident report if you wish to leverage that. And then I guess before we get into that, also I'd like to welcome Brendan and Alex as our co-organizers who've hosted vast majority of our in-person events. So thank you so much for being consistently carrying the torch of Angular DC forward. Okay, doc. So community announcement time. So we have I am about to book a great next talk for Angular DC, which will be announced soon, I hope. But however, if you'd like to speak yourself, I'll share the Google form link in the chat as well for that. Please submit a request through that. And then I guess if you would like to speak at Tech Talk DC, that's this. Still, we're lacking some organizers there. Please just reach out to me on my Twitter at DeLuca. All right. So, is anyone hiring? We have Zoom Info, the company Brandon and Alex works at. Here's their careers page. Do you guys want to drop a line about that?
Yeah, sure. Zoom Info, we are based in the Bethesda area, but we're hiring all over the place, and we have offices all over the place, in person, remote. We're rapidly growing. Great place to work, great company culture. So if you are looking to make a change, please reach out. In 1 second, I'll drop my Twitter handle and the link, and you can feel free to reach out and DM me on Twitter. If you're looking at all, both Brendan and I are happy to talk to you and see if it would be a fit. But we're looking for great engineers, so we'd love to talk to all of you.
And also, if you're looking for a job, or if you have anything else to share, please mention it in the chat, and we will make your announcements for you. All right. So we have Excella as our event sponsor here. So thank you, Excella, for providing the resources to make this event possible. And Excella is also hiring. We're hiring data and UX engineers primarily at the moment. However, definitely do give it a look-see. We're always looking for great engineers. All right, and tonight's giveaway, we have a Wallaby.js and a Quokka.js license pair to give away. So thank you, Wallaby, for sponsoring our meetup. You can check out their tools on wallabyjs.com and quokka.js.com. They are plugins for VS Code. They allow you to run your test as you type and display results next to your code. It's also great, and Quokka is great to have a TypeScript or a /JavaScript REPL environment right within your VS Code, so you can go write your little code snippets and have it executed side by side right next to your code without having to go through any compilation or execution step yourself. So I've used both of these tools, and I do use them. So definitely give them a try. So we will, as mentioned earlier in the YouTube chat, we will be asking a question at the end of Gleb's talk, and then we'll award it to the winner. So we have Mackenzie Morgan saying we need an Erlang engineer on her team, and then that's about it. Okie doke. So here, without further ado, we have Dr. Gleb Bahmutov, who's going to be talking to us about Cypress. And he's a JavaScript ninja, an image processing expert, and a software quality fanatic. I think at this point, Gleb has created a Cypress PR in every open source project that exists. But I think new projects are being created on a daily basis. So we'll hand the stage off to Gleb. So thank you.
Thank you, Dogan, and thank you for inviting me. I'm always happy to talk to people, especially during COVID, where travel is restricted. What else can you do but prepare fun little presentations? And this presentation is especially fun because I apologize, I'm not going to speak about anything Angular specific. On the other hand, you'll be able to apply everything I show here to your Angular projects, no matter what the implementation details are. And you will see later that we'll be testing different implementations, and they all will work out just the same. Cypress is a great Wordle player. If you're not asleep or you haven't been asleep in the last couple of months, you know that the world is crazy about this game Wordle, where you have to guess a 5-letter word and the game gives you suggestions. Cypress is such a great Wordle player, as you can see right here in the screenshot, that it guessed this word epoxy on the first try, which is amazing. Okay, during this presentation, I have made a little quiz on slido.com, and the event code is Wordle that you'll be able to answer through the presentation. I have, I think, 3 different quizzes just to keep this interactive. So let me show how Cypress can play Wordle and test your site at the same time. Before we begin, I want to start how I usually start in the last couple of years. We are in a climate emergency. Last week, Antarctica registered a temperature which is almost 70 degrees Fahrenheit above normal, like at the top of it. It's not a measurement error. Literally, our planet is on fire. I think survival is possible, but only if we act now. We can change, our personal life, but only by joining together we can really affect how things are going. There are organizations that work to solve the climate crisis in every city, every country around the world. Join one and start acting today. Okay, back to the game. So let me tell you how my day starts. About at 3:01 a.m. in the middle of the night, I get this email, and it looks just like this, and it says Wordle Daily Hint. And it has, for example, in this case, there are 5 letters in the word, and the last one is Y. And that's it. And I don't know any other letters, right? I just know that the word of the day that Wordle plays, and it plays 1 word a day, ends with Y. And as you know, right, it's epoxy in this case, but sometimes even after I wake up and I look at that email and I played Wordle myself, it takes a while, right? So for example, spoiler alert, I got the middle A, and still it took me 6 tries to find the word shall. So even with a hint, sometimes it's not enough. So in that case, what I can do, I can go back to my repository, Cypress Wordle, and kick off another GitHub Actions workflow. if I don't know how to guess for word. And in that workflow, I can specify how many additional letters or how many hints do I want to reveal to myself, right? By default, it's one. Just picks a random one letter out of a word, but I can specify all five and the whole word will be sent to me. If you want to subscribe, I can send you a Wordle hint every night too, right? The subscription is very cheap, just $1 per month. Of course, I'm joking, but not really. Here's an example of the run that you will see if you run the workflow. So notice it runs every day at night. And if I look at test results, the last one is the one that actually emails me the hint. The screenshot that it sends to me looks like this, right? So in the middle, that's the Wordle that's revealed, or like the letter of a Wordle that's revealed. I can also watch the recording where the test runner plays, and if I just look at the end, this is what it emails to me. Okay, let me just go back to my presentation. A few words before I proceed. So I'm Gleb Bahmutov. I work at Mercari US. I do a lot of things with JavaScript. I had, kind of journey from C and C++ through CoffeeScript and C# to Node.js and JavaScript land. I now do a lot of open source, a lot of testing, and I blog a lot. So if you're interested, check it out. I also hire, of course, like everyone else. Mercari US is a subsidiary of Mercari Japan. We are an online marketplace where you can sell your stuff. You can buy someone else's stuff to give it a second home. I strongly believe in the mission of a company because it creates a circular economy where you don't throw as much, right? Or you don't buy as much as well. You reuse things because a thing you might not need anymore, someone else probably can give a second home for money. So it's good. The presentation has a bunch of parts. It's not that important, but I'll show how I solved Wordle, how I solve a Wordle for real, and then I discuss a few things that make this particular test runner, Cypress, really good for any kind of application, why you might consider it for your web application, not just for playing games. And the impetus, or kind of what kicked it off, was someone asked me when they were discussing Wordle if Cypress could solve Wordle automatically, right? And I didn't play Wordle myself at the time, and I saw this particular implementation and this particular blog that solves Wordle using Playwright. It's another test runner from Microsoft. And I kind of looked at the code and I was like, oh my God, this is Java and the solution is complicated. And what you see here is literally like 1/10 of a code in that repository. And so like every developer that looks at someone else's code, I thought there must be a better way, right? So that's where I start with Cypress. So if you never use Cypress, you install it like any npm dependency. It's a dev dependency, so that's why I use -d. It downloads npm module, which downloads a binary that is built for your operating system, Windows or Mac or Linux. It's open source, so you can start using it in any project right away. And the test looks like typical Mocha test, right? You visit some kind of URL, you find an element by CSS selector, like in this case, class, you type. So there are all these commands that are chained of a global site object, site visit, site get, site type. And everything is bundled in. So you have chai assertions, you have Synon, you have network control, and so on. So this is a typical test. And this is how the browser looks when it runs the test. You see the application is running in an iframe on the right side of the browser. And the commands that you saw from the test file, site visit, site get, site type, are shown in the command log column on the left. So you can see right away what the test did, where it had an error, or how many elements it found, and so on. If you never used Cypress before, the company Cypress just released their learning center, where they put together a lot of self-guided tutorials and courses. There are courses and documentation, of course, but this is something that just put together, and I highly recommend if you never use Cypress to look at learn.cypress.io. But I know how to use Cypress. I worked there for 4 years. I've written a lot of this documentation. So in this case, I'm going to show it how I solve Wordle using this video. Now, this video is something you can watch yourself, and I'm going to run it, but I'm going to mute it, and I'm just going to explain what's going on. So don't freak out because you see my face and my face in the video. So Wordle is a game where you have to guess the word of the day. And every time you enter 5-letter words, it gives you feedback. For example, table, E is the correct letter at correct position. So the last letter of the target word is E. H is in the second position. Now, I and R are marked with yellow. That means they are present in the word, but at some other places, not at the fourth and fifth position. And you can also see the keyboard where it keeps track of, guesses and wrong letters. So the gray letters are wrong. So in order for me to solve Wordle, I create a new repository and I initialize new project and I install Cypress as a dev dependency. I also copy Prettier because I usually use Prettier to format my source code, so I don't have to worry about that. I initialize a new Cypress project by using my utility that just creates, a typical spec file and Cypress configuration file. This is a configuration file. That's where I will set the base URL. That's the URL I want to visit and test, when I play the game. And, I set it, and the spec file is the test file, right? And it uses Mocha syntax, so I have a block of text and a test inside. I open Cypress and it runs the browser. And at first it shows, okay, there's something wrong. And of course, I misspelled base URL. That's why it's wrong. Cypress is watching the file, so it always reruns the test automatically if I change and save the spec file. So I'm visiting the URL. This URL was actually set before New York Times bought Wordle from its creator. And it's a browser. I can open the DevTools, I can inspect the markup, and the first thing I have to do is I have to figure out how to close this model pop-up. All right. So I have to look up, this particular application, I didn't write it, someone else wrote it. It uses a lot of, shadow DOM web components. So in order for you to kind of tell Cypress, hey, just go through the shadow DOM boundary, I'm setting a setting in Cypress JSON settings file. And then I can find elements. It doesn't matter if they're inside another shadow root. Okay, so again, I'm looking at that model, and now I have to figure out how to pick that close model button so that from the test, I can select it and click on it. And so I can see the game icon with icon close attribute. So I go to the spec file and I use scikit command, and then I provide that selector, right? And it's a game icon element with icon close attribute, and I click close, and it's almost correct, except it tells me there are two elements that it found on the page. So it doesn't know which one I want to click. So I just add visible, which is a jQuery selector in addition to a CSS selector. Under the hood, Cypress uses jQuery selectors. So now I can see, yeah, my test ran successfully. It clicked on the right button, and then it removed the dialog. Okay, so what do I do next? Well, I have to enter a word itself, right? So normally I would just type on my keyboard, and in order for me to figure out how to do that, I inspect the code of application and I figure out, okay, it probably just listens to the key down event, right, on the window object. And that's how it reacts to my keyboard. And so I go there and I find the code that says, oh, the key down, that's the application code that the creator of the app wrote. And if I want to generate the same, event, I can go back to my spec file. I can take window command, and then I can just say trigger, and then key down and provide the letter A as a key. That's it, right? That seems pretty straightforward. And because this is just a JavaScript, I can take a word like hello, I can split it up into 5 characters, and then for each letter, I can call window.trigger, command and then just give it letter. And look at this. I just entered hello world. Hello world. I've said Wordle and word so many times. Now I don't know which word I'm saying anymore. Is it Wordle or word or world? Okay, the last thing, when I enter, right, it now gives me feedback. And now I have to look back and figure out, what else, right? What's the right word? And at this point, I'm looking how the application is keeping track of all the entered words, because if you reload, you see the same words you entered before. And I see local storage. It's a browser, it has local storage. So now I see that inside that local storage, it saves the game state object. So after I visit, that gives me the window, and I get this property local storage. And from there, I'm grabbing the property game state. And every time I'm grabbing something, I can actually see it in the DevTools. I can click on the command. I see what it got. I can kind of see what my task did and if it did it correctly. And so from that entry in local storage, I get the string. And if I use JSON parse, then I get this big object that the game is storing. That's where it stores all the guesses, the feedback. It even has a property called solution, right? And that's the word of the day. Sorry, to kind of bust your bubble, but that's all it is, right? The game actually has the solution in local storage. And that's where I'm grabbing it in this task, parsing it, and then splitting it into characters and triggering the events until, boom, I'm a genius, right? I solved it on the first try. So the presentation is over. The meetup is done. Thank you for coming. Bye-bye. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding, right? So the game, yes, says everything is correct, right? We figured it out, right? We use someone else's code to look up how it listens to event, right? We look at shadow DOM and so on. And by the way, that was just the beginning. When I looked at Wordle the first time in that video, after that, I did a lot of variants. So you can find the whole playlist on YouTube. But here's the solution in detail, right? Again, Mocha syntax, visit the page, grab, well, now that New York Times bought it, right? You have to grab New York Times Wordle state object, you parse it from a string into an object, you get the solution, you click to close the first model that appears, and then you trigger the events. Now, if this is your first introduction to Cypress, Cypress has, positives and negatives, like every tool. I think on a positive, as you can see, that video was 6 minutes. In 6 minutes, I installed it, I wrote the test, I figured out how application is working, and I went through the game, right? So fast installation, accessing application data, time travel where I could look up what each command did, like it's all nice. The screenshots, the videos of a test run, it's nice. But there are some negative sides. For example, working with Shadow DOM, right? Is not the most convenient, I want to say, in Cypress, right? You have to use JavaScript or TypeScript to write your test. You can also use CoffeeScript if you really want, but many people say, okay, this is limited, right? Other tools have binding for other languages. I will write JavaScript or TypeScript only in both columns, actually, right? Because yes, it's a limitation, but unfortunately, that's a limitation that's set by the browser. Your browser doesn't run anything but JavaScript. So you might as well use JavaScript or TypeScript to write your end-to-end tests. Okay, so here's the time for online quiz. If you're online, if you go to slido.com and you enter the event code Wordle, you can vote for in this quiz, right, that says, okay, this solution that I just shown in a video, like if this is good solution, if you disagree, right? Because you probably disagree, right? And I agree with the second opinion, right? Or third now, right? I did solve it. but it's not, the real solution. I just looked it up, right? I did not really find the right solution. I could email myself that, but okay. So why don't we solve it for real this time? So let's look at the game itself. So as I said, every time it gives you a word and you enter your guess, it gives you feedback, right? A letter could be in the right position, it could be in a word but at the wrong position, or it could not be in a word, right? So there are all three different letter feedbacks. And if you inspect the way the application implements it, right, you can see, okay, there is game tile. So there are 5 tiles in the last word. And for each, it has an attribute once you submit the word. And for example, in this case, letter W has evaluation absent. Letter E is present somewhere. And the letter Y is at the right position. So evaluation attribute is equal correct. So here's how we're going to solve Wordle for real this time. We're going to start with a list of all possible 5-letter words. And the thing that drives me crazy about this particular game is that the word Wordle itself is not 5 letters, right? It's 6. So I just, how is it possible? Okay, so from that list of words, we'll pick a word. And I'm not going to discuss how. Let's say we randomly pick a word, right? That's our guess. We're going to enter it just like we did before by triggering events. And then we're going to look at the feedback from the page, right, for each character. And, if everything is correct, everything evaluates to, correct, then boom, we're done. All 5 letters match. That's a word. Unfortunately, probably we're not correct. So we're going to take the feedback from each letter and take our original word list and filter it out. For example, if the letter is not there present, then we're going to remove all the words from the list that have that letter. You just have to watch out because there are edge cases. For example, if a letter is present twice, it's not necessarily that you can filter all words without that letter or with that letter because it might be actually in different positions. So you have to filter the word list in certain order, But let's say we filter based on feedback, and then we go back to number 1, right? Step number 1, where we take this filtered list that's now smaller, and then we pick a guess and we enter it and we look at feedback. Okay, here's the real solution. We start the same way. So imagine we have a word list somehow, and we'll try the word from that list. So we'll have a function called try next word, and we'll give it a word list. And just remember with feedback, here's what we're gonna do, right? In that function, we're gonna pick a word. In this case, I'm using Lodash that's bundled with Cypress to just pick a sample word, right? Out of a whole array, just give me a random item. I'm gonna enter it, and you saw how I enter it, right? By splitting the 5-letter word into individual characters and triggering an event on a window. And then now we're getting the feedback, right? So we're getting all those game tiles, and for each tile, we get the attribute letter, right? And now we'll just process those letters. We'll look at the evaluation and we filter the word list. So now we have a smaller word list at the end. And if at the end all letters were correct, then we're done. Otherwise, we call the function itself with that filtered word list. So we iterate recursively. So let's see how it looks. Okay, so notice hinge was the first one, then Porky has more correct letters, and then we enter Dopey, and at the end, we just have epoxy, which is the solution. And we're done, and we print solved in the column. Again, one more time, we're entering words, we're looking at feedback, we're filtering the list, and then we use that list to iterate recursively, and at the end, we log solved. Now, if we just look at the column of commands, we can see how we start with a word list of 2,300 5-letter words, a lot of words, right? We use hinge, and based on the feedback that the application gives us, we filter that list, and now we have only 487 words. And we use Perky, which filters that list to just 5 words, and then Dopey filters it to 2 words, and then 50-50, depending on the word we pick epoxy, and epoxy was solution, so we picked correctly. Okay, all good, right? So what did we learn from here is that we usually have to use recursive algorithm. The game is different from a test, right? In a test, you try to be deterministic. You always try to go through the same user flow, and you know exactly, or you should know exactly what to expect, right? You never have to guess. In a game, you don't know what to expect, right? So you have to look at feedback and maybe do something else. So that's why you have to write a recursive algorithm that actually runs until it actually converges to the right solution. Now, you might ask me, where did you get that word list, the initial list of 5-letter words? And I'll answer it with a question. Where does the application get it? Right? That's what was my question when I looked at this. Because if I open the DevTools, right, I can see only a single call to the application. It fetches the HTML and CSS, and then it fetches just a single JavaScript bundle. It doesn't do any calls to verify the words, to ask for, 5-letter words. So I suspected that the list of words that are valid, including the answer, is somewhere in the JavaScript bundle. So I look at the bundle and I just search for one of the words, right? So I literally search for wary. And I find this variable inside the JavaScript bundle that gives all 5-letter words like cigar, rebut, sissy, hump, awake, plush, and so on. Okay, so I find it. And now there's a question. How do I get that list from the application bundle to my spec code, right? So I can use it myself. So here's how you do it in Cypress. You set up a site intercept and network intercept. So you will observe all network calls that the application is doing to fetch main JavaScript, right? And you can use wildcards. So, you take care of like hashes and random things in a bundle. So you observe loading JavaScript resources. And once you get the matching request, you let it go to the server. So it's using continue. And then you get response. So this response has the bundle, the actual JavaScript bundle of the game. And inside the bundle, you replace, equals cigar, right? That minified 5-letter word array start, and you insert there equals window.wordList. So you add this extra assignment where you take that variable and you put it on a window object, and that's it. And then you return that bundle back, and application will just start running it, but you inserted that assignment. And what is possible then, when you do visit, okay, like when the application loads, if you open the DevTools, you can just type in window.wordList in Cypress, and all of a sudden you'll see that array. So that's how from a private JavaScript bundle, you get it to like global scope. And then what do? When you use site visit, it gives you or yields you the window object of the application page. And then from the big object, you can say it's word list property, and that's how you get the word list from the application itself. And then you can start using it. Okay, so in our list of pros and cons, I will add network control, right? Cypress has built-in spying and stubbing of any resource. It cannot, for example, spy on like things like WebSockets, but any CP resource, fine. You can replace, control, spy, and so on. So pretty powerful feature. Okay. Time for another quiz. What's your favorite 5-letter word? And for me, it's probably super. Paint. Yeah, I should have entered grade. I usually, if I start playing Wordle, I would use grade, table, or chair. A word where every letter is different. I rate. I see a lot of Wordle players here. All right, so here's something else, right, that I want to do. I don't want just play the Wordle for today, right? Every time I play Wordle in Cypress, it will give me a different word, different solution, right? Like I said, a task should be deterministic. So can I make the game deterministic? So in Wordle implementation, you have all the words that are possible. And the way it picks a word, it just looks at the date, right? At the timestamp, like Unix timestamp, and then it just does modular and it picks a word. So every day everything is predetermined, which means in Cypress I can do the same thing. Here's how I actually play specific word, every time it runs, doesn't matter what the real date is. Okay, so let it finish and then I'll show what's happening. Okay, so in this case, point. I'll go back to the spec file. You see how there's a countdown to the next day, right? Because it will be at midnight. So before I visit the page, before application code loads, I use cyclock command. This is a command that allows you to control all timer-related functions in the application. In this case, I can set the date that I want application to think it is, right? So if application does, new date or date now, this is what it will get, 1st of January of this year, or like 19th, right? And so now every time I reload this test, it will think, that this is the same date. Because my application uses some of the timers, right? I cannot just override everything, right? Like you see, like even model doesn't appear. So I'll go back to cyclock. By default, it overrides timeouts and interval, all the things. But here I'm just saying, just override the date constructor, right? Let the other timing related functions just stay as they are. And now it worked again, right? And now every time I execute this test, right, it's deterministic and it will always give me a proxy as the word of the day. So this is that, kind of building up on that feature is that I can iterate over all the dates by using range from 1 to 31. I can form the date string and I can play Wordle for every day of January. And this is how it looks where literally it's kind of boring to be honest, where it's the same things, but it's a good way of kind of testing the application and making sure that you're picking of a word, filtering of a list, feedback actually works with a lot of edge cases of letters that are double in a word and so on. So this is Wordle playing all the words for the month. Okay, so to our column, I'm gonna add clock control, because Cypress can do it straight out of the box. And John, yes, you can play Wordle for tomorrow, right? Just set the date to tomorrow's date, and you'll play it, and you can play it for every day all the way to, I don't know, 2100 or 3000, whatever you want. Okay. So we know how to solve a Wordle. We know how to make it deterministic. Now the second thing that I need is, if I want to play it, I need a hint, right? Because I'm a pretty simple person who doesn't know English very well. So I need to email myself that screenshot with just a single letter revealed. So here's how we do it. Once we finish the game, right? Okay. We can take all those tiles on the page, right? And we can hide everything but the hint letter, right? We usually think of the test runner as like looking at the page and, looking things up, running assertion. But a test runner that has access to the page can manipulate things. It can set attributes or remove attributes, set classes, remove classes, set styles, remove styles, anything you want, including changing the text of the input boxes or elements. So in this case, we just invoke text and we set the tiles. And once you removed all the letters but one, so now you have just the tiles, you can take a screenshot. And the screenshot is using a built-in Cypress size screenshot command. And in this case, I'm taking just the container. I don't care about the keyboard. I just take the container with all the word guesses, right, and the hint. And I'm using screenshot command, and I give it a name solved. And now I have to do something with that image. So right now, I'm just taking its full file name, right, of a PNG image, and I'm calling site task. It's a special command. You give it a name of a task in a different plugin file. So right now, this runs in a browser, but now you want to email, and you cannot email straight from a browser. You have to write this code in Node. And I'm calling the task to email that image, and I'm giving the screenshot file name and the hint, so I know the letters, right? And here's how the plugins in my project file looks like, right? So it has a function called send hint email, wherever task name I use, and it's the same arguments, screenshot hint. I can form the full file name. I can load it, convert to base64 so I can email it later. I can form an email object, and I'm going to use SendGrid, so that's why I have, to, from, subject, and I can give a text body, and I can give HTML body, where I embed the base64 image, and I can send it using SendGrid. Whatever SMTP library you have access to, you can use. And this is what I see if I look at the GitHub Actions workflow. I can see that the tests finished successfully, and then I can see the messages from the plugins that it found the image file and it emailed to specific email address, and the hint was Y at the second letter. And then I will receive an email just like this, right, where I have the hint and the tiles as well. Now, I have another workflow where instead of just email the hint, I can email almost finished field, where, for example, if I start with the word great, it will email me this Wordle solution, right, where I have started with great, and it solves it, and it goes all the way to pound, and it tries like mount, hound, pound. It might be sound, I don't know, right? But I can actually try to guess it from there, right? Where I have all the way up to the solution. So in addition to the, cons and pros, in this case, I will add under pros is that you can write any kind of Node.js code or use any kind of Node.js library, but you cannot do it in the spec file itself. The test itself runs in the browser. You can write your Node.js code and put it in the plugins file and just use site task to call it. And this is different from other test runners. Other test runners usually run outside the browser, and then they use either, a Selenium WebDriver protocol or Chrome debugger protocol to control the browser, which is what Puppeteer, Playwright does. But Cypress test runs right in the browser in a spec file. That's how I can use like window and then get properties and so on. But if you want to call the node code, you have to call it through site task. So, I would put it under cons, that boundary, because you have to think explicitly which part is my test, which part is my utility that I need to call. Now, once I was playing Wordle, you see Wordles everywhere, right? Everyone kind of tried to create a clone. And so other clones came out, and there's a view clone, view implementation. There was a green clone for climate-related words. And let me show how you can solve them using the same code that I wrote for original Wordle. Okay, first of all, each variant has its own implementation under the hood. They don't have to use Shadow DOM. They might use something else, other framework, I don't know. But you have to know the structure. So in this case, this view Wordle clone use completely different attributes to show, the evaluation of each letter for entering letters. So if you want to reuse my solution code to run against this implementation, right, you probably have to abstract things, right? You probably have to abstract interaction with specific implementation, and it should be abstract from the algorithm itself, right? The algorithm can stay the same, but how, for example, you enter the word, right, should probably be different. Okay, so here's how I've done it. I put all the kind of interaction with a page, like entering a new word, collecting the feedback, into what I call page object, right? In this case, called playing. And I put my algorithm that picks a word, enters it, collects feedback, filters word, calls itself into a solve function. So for example, when I'm playing the view version of Wordle at that particular base URL, right, I get a word list. Now I save it in a JSON file, so I don't have to struggle. All I have to do, I have to visit the page, and I call my algorithm that solves it, and I pass it a page object. Okay. And this is how it looks when it solves the view implementation, right? Again, starts with 2,300 words, does entering words one by one, evaluates, solves it. But what's cool is that the solution algorithm just takes the page object and calls itself, right, with filtered word list. But every time it needs to, for example, enter the word, it doesn't enter it directly because it doesn't know what particular implementation on the page is. Instead, it uses the page object that has a function for entering the word in that specific implementation. And then getting the feedback from the page also is implemented by the page object. So I can use different page objects with the same algorithm function because it only uses those two things. My algorithm does the filtering of words using the feedback and calling itself recursively and knowing when to stop. Here's a typical page object. It only has enter word, right, and get letters that are specific for this particular page implementation. This is the original one that uses Vanilla.js and Shadow DOM, so slightly different implementation, right? But as long as it gives me the same evaluation format list for each letter, it's all the same. So under the pros of Cypress, I want to say it's very agnostic, right? You can express your code abstraction in any types, any ways you want. You can use little functions. You can use page object like I did here. You can write custom commands. It's up to you. It's just JavaScript. There is nothing, special about it. And the final thing I want to finish my presentation with is how to run Wordle or play Wordle on continuous integration service. And I want to ask everyone to kind of rate the CIs, right? Or kind of say your favorite CI, right? So I'll say it's this one. Right? For example, I like GitHub Actions. If you never use CI, you can say I test on my machine. Some people don't like anything, right? I think Jenkins is still popular, right? Okay, I think makes sense. Thank you for giving an answer. I'm gonna use GitHub Actions because first of all, it's open source repo, so everything is free. The security model is integrated. So for my open source, I usually go with GitHub Actions. Here's the workflow file, right? And here's my advice to you. The game, right, emails me every morning, right, at 3 a.m. But it's nice when I can configure the same workflow to be on cron and also to be able to trigger it manually, right? If I need more hints, I'll just trigger the same workflow. So in this workflow, I have manual dispatch where I provide email and the number of hints, and also the same workflow runs every morning. And here's my way of installing Cypress, caching, running it so that it can email and passing all SendGrid environment variables. It just uses Cypress from a company. They have a custom GitHub action. So I, as a user, don't have to think about how to cache things, how to run Cypress. I just say, okay, I just need to run all my tests. So please do it for me. So this is the whole thing. But it could be done even simpler. Cypress Wordle repo actually has a lot of tests, right? Remember, I played Wordle every day of January. I have different implementations of Wordle. I have other demo tests. I have real solution versus, kind of fake solution. So I have a lot of spec files. So anytime I want to run all the tests, if I just run them one by one, it takes a while, right? So this is where testing in parallel becomes crucial because end-to-end tests usually are slow. So you want to run them in parallel on multiple containers and workload balance them so they're all finished very quickly. And Cypress has it. You have to use Cypress dashboard to load balance things, but here's how you can do this. And this is the whole workflow file. Okay, so I'm going to use my reusable workflow. So I create this Cypress workflow repo. It has a workflow that sets up multiple containers, and you can pass how many containers you want to use at a time. And then, in order for you to record the test results and load balance everything, you have to provide your Cypress dashboard record key. And again, they have open source plans, or they have small public plan where you can just use it for yourself. So what this means, my repo has a lot of spec files, but they're all, for example, in this case, run on 5 machines automatically, and you can see how they're all load balanced. So the whole thing finishes in minute and 36 seconds. And you can imagine if you ran them all one by one on one machine, it would be this amount times 5. So the savings are easy to see, and all it took is this little workflow. So I think it's pretty nice. So Cypress, when I worked there, that's what I've done, right? Like I've done this integrations with different CI providers so that you don't have to configure it yourself. Like it's already done for you by maintainers of the test runner. And so I can just throw it on GitHub or Circle, and I can just say, just give me 10 boxes, and it will all run in 1/10 time. Okay, so I'm almost at the end of my presentation, and usually at the end you have like final thoughts, conclusion. This is my only conclusion. It's so fun to be able to use your tests runner and write tests, but not to actually test your software, but instead to play a game. Because Portal is fun. You kind of try to guess and you see how to solve it, and you see how to write an algorithm and how to make it independent of a page implementation. And I think it was a lot of fun. So I hope you think so too. You can find this presentation online. You can find all the code that I've shown here. And if you want to learn more about Cypress, I have a site, cypress.tips. You can also contact or look at docs.cypress.io, which is official documentation. And finally, because this is an Angular meetup after all, a while ago, I've done a presentation for Angular developers, especially if you transition away from Protractor, that specifically explains, how to transition from Protractor to Cypress. So look it up, and I apologize if I did not show anything Angular specific, but I hope you are not too mad at me. Okay, thank you very much. I'll be happy to answer any questions, and thanks for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Gleb. That was awesome. And this is also a reminder to myself for our next speaker, I guess, to have a video of just massive applause. So we'll have to set that up. Yeah, thank you so much. This was really interesting. Sometimes I feel like testing is seen as is always as a chore. So this brings the joy out of it while simultaneously demonstrating the impressive capabilities of Cypress, and also the concepts like page objects and stuff like that. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks for listening. I mean, it takes a lot faster to actually play Wordle than listen about it.
All right, well,
I don't know what's happening to my camera though. I apologize. It's weird.
That's okay. Yeah, your bricks are discoloring.
Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah, and the clock feature is pretty interesting as well. Do you have any tips and tricks about? Because I was reading this article recently about time zones. The United States Senate passed the bill unanimously, which is a shock. But they're proposing getting rid of standard time, so we'd be on the permanent daylight savings time. And one thing that I was reading in comments on Hacker News was the general kind of advice of just store your date as UTC on your server, and then you're fine. And someone was describing a situation where you intend your event to be at 5 p.m. local time, and then you store it on the server as UTC, but then months later when the event is actually going to occur, you could be out of or in and out of daylight savings time, and then you would actually be displaying 4 p.m. On your application instead of the intended 5 p.m. So are there any suggestions or tips, tricks you have about testing, time zone differences?
Okay, so long time ago, right, when I was at Cypress, but Cypress dashboard, right, we had to put paywall so we could make money as a company. And you think like setting up an event to happen at 5 a.m. 1 month in advance is complicated. We had to deal with when is the new billing cycle gonna start, right? It was it was so difficult because you're thinking like, what's the duration of a month? What is the local time? Will it actually be 1 month from now, or should we always do the first of a month, right? How do we prorate things correctly? It's unbelievably complicated. So my advice to you, try to avoid as much as possible. The one thing I want to say though, so I use CyClock, so you don't have to worry about what the actual time is, right? On the server or locally. So CyClock is unbelievably powerful. It just sets the thing. It doesn't set the time zone, right? So you control the time zone using TZ environment variable when you launch Cypress, because every browser, it just uses the system time zone. What I would recommend, first of all, look at CyClock. It freezes the clock. It can help you not only deal with non-deterministic data, like what's the date today, but it can also speed up your tasks, because then, let's say you have an interval in your application to poll for data every minute. When you freeze the clock using CyClock, you can then manually advance it from your task by using cyTick command. You can just say tick, and 1 minute passed instantly. And so your task, just finishes in 100 milliseconds instead of waiting 1 minute. So that's one. But I would advise you, when you're dealing with time or any kind of like very like complicated things, to have one level of indirection, right? Like an object that just, for example, gives you the day or the time zone. Because if you have that object, you can expose it. So from the test, you can control it. And you can say, okay, if your application code is asking for time zone from this object, access that object and set the time zone to, I don't know, like India time zone, right? And when application will think it's Indian time zone, right? So that level of indirection is super helpful in general.
Awesome. Thank you for the tip. All right, let's run our giveaway. Brendan, Alex, if you'd like to.
Yeah.
kick it off.
So, like we said earlier, if you missed it, we have 2 licenses to give away. One for Quokka.js and one for Wallaby.js. So the way we're going to do it, we have 2 trivia questions. We'll go ahead and read them off, and then the first person to answer correctly for each of the questions will be our winner. So to redeem it, if you're the winner, we'll go ahead and you can reach out to Dohan's Twitter @DeLuca. You can see it there under his name, and he will be able to pass along the license for you. So first question, again, just answer in the chat. First person to get it right. This will be for the Quokka.js license. What year was Angular released? And by Angular, we're referring to V2.
We also need suspenseful music that we can't play in the background.
This is Angular DC, our JS version. Next time we have a meetup, we'll be on too.
All right, we have our winner, Altayeb. 2016 is correct. So you will be getting the Quokka.js license. And again, reach out to Dohan on Twitter @DeLuca. And 1995, very close. Reach out to Dohan on Twitter, and he will be able to get you that license. So just go ahead and DM him there. Second trivia question, and this will be for the Wallaby.js license. So of the versions of Angular that have been released, which major version was skipped? There was one that was passed over, one major version. Which one was that? Ooh, that was close. I think that's there. All right, yeah, that is correct. Angular 3 was skipped. They went from 2 directly to 4. Awesome. So John S., same sort of thing. Reach out to Dohan @DeLuca on Twitter in a DM, and he will pass you that Wallaby.js license. So that's it for our giveaways. Good job on those questions.
All right. Thank you, Gleb. Thank you, Brendan. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, everyone who joined. This was awesome. And see y'all next month or something.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Gleb.